The Arizona sun does not warm anyone. It punishes. It comes down on the cracked earth, like it has a personal grudge against something that still dares to breathe. Far above, against a white sky, 3 vultures draw their slow circles, then 4. Then 5. They are patient, the way only something that knows it will win can afford to be patient. Below them, the trunk of a saguaro that died last winter. And beside it, something else. Motionless, but not yet surrendered. A knife lies flat in an open palm. A song rises, cracked and dry, breaking in an oat dust. Not a cry, something worse. An acceptance then. From the south, the sound of hooves, 6 of them. Coming closer. Fast. A hand tightens around the handle of the knife. The sun in Arizona does not warm you. It punishes you. It comes down like something personal. Like it decided specifically, on this particular Tuesday in the summer of 1877, that it had a problem with you. With your skin. With your water. With the fact that you are still breathing, when it has been working so hard to change that. Nala had stopped arguing with the sun 2 days ago. She lay on her back beside a dead saguaro. The cactus had given up sometime last winter. She understood that. She did not judge it. The ground beneath her was cracked like old pottery. Like the earth itself had been thirsty for so long it just stopped caring. Above her, 3 vultures, then 4, then 5. She watched them draw their slow circles in the white sky. Patient, unhurried, the way only something that knows it will win can afford to be patient. Still breathing, she thought at them. In Apache, because some insults only land properly in your mother tongue. Still breathing. Come back tomorrow. But even as she thought it, she knew. Tomorrow was not a promise she could make. 8 months ago, Nala could run. Not just run. She could run the way water runs. Finding the fastest way through any terrain without thinking about it. Instinct. Muscle memory built over 26 years of moving through this desert like she belonged to it. Because she did. She knew every rock formation between the Dragoon Mountains and the San Pedro River. She could read the color of clouds the way other people read faces. She could track a jackrabbit across solid stone and not lose the trail. She was the best pathfinder the Chiricahua had. The chief knew it. The warriors knew it. The elders knew it. And 8 months ago when the soldiers came, they knew exactly where to find them. Too exactly. Nala had noticed it in the first seconds of the attack. The soldiers came from the north and the east simultaneously, cutting off both escape routes. You do not do that by accident. You do not do that with a lucky guess. You do that with information, fresh information, given by someone who knew where the band would be camped that particular night. She had turned to look at the chief in that moment of chaos. Horses screaming, smoke rising, women pulling children into the rocks. He was not surprised. That was the thing. That was the thing she could not unknow after she saw it. His face in the first moment of the attack, not fear, not shock. Just a kind of bracing. Like a man who has agreed to walk into cold water and is steeling himself for the temperature. He knew. And then, cracked from the ridge above, and the world went white, and Nala stopped running forever. They had carried her for 3 days after the battle. Moving camp. Moving again. The army never stopped following that season, following and burning and following some more. She had understood, even through the fever of the wound, what a burden she was. She had understood it with a clarity that the pain somehow made sharper instead of duller. She could not walk. She would not walk again. The man who knew about such things in the band had pressed his fingers along her spine, and his face had said everything before his mouth said anything. From the waist down, he told the chief quietly, "Nothing will return." She had watched them discuss her from across the camp. Not cruelly. That was almost the worst part. Not cruelly at all. They were practical people in an impractical situation, and they sat in a circle and they talked, and occasionally one of them glanced over at her with an expression that was closer to grief than malice. She did not look away. She refused to look away. The chief came to her himself. That was a dignity, she supposed. He squatted down beside her and spoke in a low voice. "The spirits have called you to rest," he said. She almost laughed. Spirits. As if it had nothing to do with him. He met her eyes for only a moment. Just long enough for her to see it. That flicker. Not shame exactly. Something smaller than shame. Something a man who has already justified the unjustifiable to himself looks like when the person he wronged looks directly at him. Fear. He was afraid of what she knew, and suddenly she understood. This was not just about her being unable to walk. There were others who had been injured, others who were carried, others who had been kept. This was about silence. Her silence specifically. He left her a water skin, half full. And a knife. She understood what the knife was for. She watched her brother's face as they broke camp. He was 22 years old, and he had never been good at hiding what he felt. His jaw was working. His hands kept starting movements and stopping them. He looked at her 3 times, then looked away, then looked again. The 4th time he looked, she shook her head at him. Barely. Just once, "Go," that movement said. "I know, I understand. Go." He went. She watched the last silhouette disappear over the ridge, and then there was just the desert, the sky. The silence that comes after everything has been decided. Day 1. She drank carefully. She rationed each swallow. Counted them. She had done field medicine before. You do not lead a hunting party without knowing how long a body can last on limited water in summer heat. 3 days. Maybe 4 if you were disciplined. If you did not panic. If you lay still and let the heat take what it needed without fighting it. She did not sleep that first night. She lay on her back and she looked at the stars and she thought about water. Not in a desperate way. In a cataloging way. Every water source she had ever found and within 20 miles of this location. The seasonal creek 2 ridges east that might be dry by now. The spring beneath the overhang to the northwest that would take 2 hours to reach on legs that worked. The damp earth at the base of certain rock formations where you could dig and wait. She could not reach any of them. She thought about her mother. About sitting in the shade of a juniper tree while her mother combed out her hair with fingers that smelled like pine resin and wood smoke. She thought about the weight of a good bough in her hand. She thought about a morning 3 years ago when she had stood on a ridge before sunrise and watched the whole valley below fill up with orange light, and she had felt something so specific in that moment. Not happiness exactly, but rightness. The feeling of being exactly where you were supposed to be. She had not expected to miss that feeling so much. Day 2 arrived without ceremony. The water was 3/4 gone by midday. She slowed her breathing deliberately, counted inhales, counted exhales. The hallucination started in the afternoon, not dramatic ones, just soft ones. Her mother's voice from somewhere to the left. The sound of children running that dissolved when she turned her head. The desert shimmered, everything shimmered. She pressed her face against the ground because the ground was 1/2 degree cooler than the air. And sometimes 1/2 degree is everything. Day 3 came with a silence that had a different quality than the previous silences. This one felt final. She had felt final silences before. She knew them. You develop a sense for the particular texture of air at the end of things. And this silence, this white, breathless, motionless summer morning, had that texture. The water skin was empty. Had been empty since before dawn. She picked up the knife. She held it flat on her palm for a moment, just feeling the weight. It was a good knife, good balance, Lawpats. She had used it for years. It knew her hand. She began to sing. The death song her grandmother had taught her was not sad, exactly. That was the thing people who had never heard it did not understand. It was not a song of grief. It was a song of completion, of a life acknowledged in full before the closing. Her grandmother had sung it in a strong voice, sitting upright, looking east at the sunrise. That was how it was supposed to be done. Her own voice was cracked and dry. The notes came out rough at the edges, but they came out right. She knew the melody in her bones. You do not forget what your grandmother put there. She was 3 verses in when she heard it. At first she folded it into the hallucinations. The sound of hooves, easy enough to dismiss. She had been hearing things since yesterday afternoon. But the sound did not dissolve. It got louder. She stopped singing. She opened her eyes, a dust cloud on the south horizon, moving fast, moving toward her with the particular purposeful quality of animals that know where they are going. 6 horses, 6 riders. She closed her fingers around the knife. She watched them come without moving. No point in moving, but she turned her head and she marked each of them as they approached. The way she had always marked terrain, always counted, always assessed. Old habit. Older than the wound. Older than the last 8 months of learning a new kind of life on the ground. 6 riders. White men. Cowboys. Working clothes, not military. No blue coats, no rank insignia. Ranch hands by the look of them. Which meant they were probably not here on official business. Which meant the threat they represented was a different kind of threat than soldiers. Soldiers had rules. Ranch hands had none. They pulled up their horses in a rough half-circle around her. She looked at them. Not up at them. She refused the angle that would have put her at the supplicant position. Chin tilted, eyes going upward. She looked straight out, level with their horses' chests, and let her gaze move from face to face with the same, flat, assessing calm she would have given to reading weather. The first man spoke. He had the kind of voice that expected to be funny. Well, would you look at that? Laughter from 2 of the others. Apache woman, said a second man, slower, like he was reading a curiosity sign at a traveling show. Crippled one, best keep riding, said the first man. Not our problem. Not worth the trouble, agreed a third. She kept her face still. She had heard words like these before. Not in English. She did not speak much English. But the tone needed no translation. Was universal. The tone was the sound of a person being assessed for their nuisance value and found negligible. She had killed men for less, except now she could not stand up, which was a new variable in the old equation. She tightened her grip on the knife. If one of them dismounted with a particular kind of intention, she knew what she would do. She had always known, had made peace with it, even before the knife was left. Even before the final silence settled in this morning. There were things worse than dying. She had a list. She had always been practical that way. The men had almost finished deciding. She could feel the decision forming in their loose, slouched body language. Keep riding. Not our problem. Not worth the trouble. And then one of them had not moved. He sat his horse differently than the others. Further back, slightly apart. He had not said anything yet. He had a face the sun had worked on for a long time, weathered in that particular way of men who spent most of their lives outdoors, not from vanity but from necessity. He was older than the others. Not old, just older. Like he had been carrying something heavy for a while, and had learned to adjust his posture around the weight of it. He was looking at her, and she looked back at him. She did not drop her gaze. She did not look away. She did not arrange her face into any expression that might make him more comfortable or more likely to help her. She simply looked at him with the full, unedited truth of her situation. Dying. Unafraid and entirely uninterested in his pity. Something moved across his face. She could not name it. It was too complicated to name. Too many things happening in too brief a time. Recognition of something. And then a flinching from it, and then something that looked almost like the opposite of flinching. He looked away from her. He looked at the horizon. She watched him make a decision. He swung down off his horse. Beckett, one of the others, impatient, warning. Leave it. He walked toward her, not fast. Each step measured and deliberate. The way a man walks when he is very aware that he might startle someone who is holding a knife and has already made their peace with using it. He stopped 6 feet away from her. She raised the knife. Not threatening. Exactly. Just present. I see you. I am not without options. Do not mistake stillness for surrender. He looked at the knife, then back at her face. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said. She did not speak English well enough to answer that. But she understood hurt. She understood the slow, careful voice. She understood that he had his hands at his sides and had not reached for the gun at his hip. She watched him. "Beckett, you have lost your mind," one of the men called from above. "We have got Henderson's cattle to find and no time for." "Then go find them," Beckett said, without turning around. Without raising his voice, just said it. And something in the way he said it communicated very clearly that this was not a discussion. Silence from the men above. Then the sound of horses shifting, of men exchanging looks that she could not see but could imagine. "Your funeral?" one of them said, and they rode. She listened to the hoofbeats recede. She tracked them by sound the way she had always tracked things. Past the first ridge, around the east formation, fading, gone. And then there were two of them, in the desert, one standing, one on the ground, both very still. He reached slowly into the saddlebag, moved like he was aware of every inch of movement, narrating it with his body for her benefit. "See what I am doing. See that it is this and not something else." He pulled out a canteen. The sound it made when he shook it. That sound. She had not realized until that exact moment how completely her body had given up on the idea of water. How her throat had stopped sending signals because there was no point in sending signals for things that did not exist. And then that sound, water moving inside metal, and every cell in her body came back online, simultaneously like a row of oil lamps being lit one by one. Fast. He held the canteen out to her. She did not reach for it immediately. She looked at it, looked at him. Read his face one more time for the thing that would tell her whether this was kindness or the preamble to something worse. She had been reading faces her whole life. Faces in firelight, faces across treaty tables, faces of men who said one thing and meant another. She was very good at it. It had kept her alive through things that should have killed her more than once. His face was tired. That was the dominant note. Tired and a little bit broken in a way that had calcified over time, that had become structural rather than acute. He was not excited to be here. He was not performing magnanimity for an audience. He was a man in a desert holding out a canteen to another person in a desert, and his face said that this was simply what he was doing, and he had not yet figured out what it meant. She took the canteen. She drank. The water came down her throat and she had to stop herself from making a sound, because the sound that wanted to come out was not dignified, and she was still, even now, even here, even in this, Nala of the Chiricahua, and she did not make undignified sounds in front of strangers. She drank until her hands stopped shaking. He took it without comment. "Can you move at all?" he asked. She knew move. She shook her head, then pointed from her waist downward. Nothing. Stillness. A part of her body that had become geography rather than self. He looked at this information for a moment. Not with pity. She was watching for pity, braced for it, already building the wall she would have needed. It was not pity. It was more like a man looking at a problem and sorting through the practical dimensions of it. "I'm going to pick you up," he said. "If you stab me, we both go down and neither of us gets where we're going. You understand?" She understood enough. She looked at him, at the knife, at him again. She dropped the knife into the dust. It cost her. She felt it cost her. The small internal reckoning of setting down the thing you had trusted absolutely in favor of a person you did not trust at all. It was the most difficult thing she had done in the last 3 days, and the last 3 days had contained some genuinely difficult things. He nodded, just once. Like he understood what the gesture had cost. He crouched down beside her and slid one arm behind her back, the other under her knees, and lifted. She was lighter than she should have been. She knew this. 3 days without food. A long season of deprivation before that. She had felt her own weight changing, and had noted it the way she noted other tactical information, without sentiment. Useful to know. Not comfortable to know, but useful. He did not comment on her weight. He carried her to his horse, a solid bay with a white star on its forehead, and settled her in the saddle with the careful economy of someone who had thought briefly about mechanics and executed the solution without drama. Then he mounted behind her, keeping himself back from her, arms on either side to hold the reins without enclosing her. She felt him make that deliberate space between them. She noticed it. 2 hours west, he said. My ranch, can you hold that long? She did not answer. She straightened her spine and looked forward and held the saddle horn, which he seemed to take as yes. They rode west. The desert moved past them in that slow, scrolling way it had. The same colors repeating in slightly different arrangements, the light changing angle and temperature. As the afternoon deepened toward evening, she knew this land. She had passed through this section of Arizona territory many times. The rock formation to the north that looked like a kneeling figure. The dry wash to the south that ran with water for exactly 3 weeks after the summer rains. The place where the road dipped into a hollow that was 10 degrees cooler than everything around it. She did not tell him any of this. She rode and she watched and she thought. He was a man, she thought, who had decided something without fully deciding it yet, who was acting on an impulse he had not finished examining. She had known people like this. They were not always predictable. Sometimes the impulse held. Sometimes it didn't survive contact with the practical consequences. She thought about the knife she had dropped in the dust. She thought, if this turns out to be wrong, I will find another way. She was Apache. She had always found another way. He slowed the horse twice to let her drink from the canteen again. Both times he offered it without speaking. She took it without speaking. The silence between them was not comfortable. Exactly, but it was not hostile. It was informational. 2 people reading each other through small actions because neither of them had the words yet. He whistled once, very softly, not to her, just a sound he made. A melody that trailed off after a few bars like he had forgotten the rest. She filed this away. A man who whistles absently is not a man in performance mode. Is not a man constructing an impression. He had forgotten she was there for a moment, which meant the version of him she was seeing was real. The sun went orange, the sky went pink behind the mesas, and in the last light of the day, a small structure appeared on the flat ground ahead of them. A house, a barn, a corral with 3 horses, a well, not grand, not even close to grand, but in the desert at the end of the 3rd day of dying. It looked to her like something out of a story her grandmother used to tell, the kind of story where the person who needed shelter found it at exactly the moment they needed it, and you were not supposed to analyze the coincidence, just accept the grace of it. He carried her inside. The house was one large room with a sleeping area at the back. Clean in the functional way of a man who lives alone, and has developed systems rather than tastes. Everything in a specific place, nothing decorative, everything useful. A wood stove, a table, 2 chairs, shelves with goods and dried size flowers arranged by size. On the wall shelf next to the window, a photograph, a woman, and a small girl. The photograph was in a simple frame. No other decorations on that shelf. Everything else in the house had a function. But this was on the shelf, the way a person puts something on a shelf when they want to be able to see it from anywhere in the room. He put her on the bed. Gently. Like something fragile that might not know it was fragile. She pushed herself upright against the wall immediately, because she did not like lying down in a room with a stranger, because sitting gave her the angle and the visibility she needed, because she was not fragile, and she wanted to be clear about that. He did not comment on this, either. He moved to the shelves. Opened a tin. Found bread. Real bread, not hardtack, actual bread from earlier in the week, slightly stale but present. Found dried meat. Found a jar of preserved peaches. He put them in front of her on the bed. She ate. She ate the way she had learned to eat during the season of deprivation. Slowly, deliberately, not because she had control over her hunger, but because she knew the consequences of eating too fast when your body has been this empty. She had seen soldiers do it. She had seen her own people do it. Speed does not help. Speed gets undone. He sat in one of the chairs at the table, gave her his back, looked out the window at the darkening desert. She watched the back of his head while she ate. She thought, "This is a man who understands that being watched is sometimes worse than being hungry. Who knows that giving a person their back is sometimes a gift?" She thought, "Where did he learn that?" He spoke after a while. Without turning around, "My name is Beckett," he said. "Beckett Rourke." She was quiet. "You don't have to tell me yours," he said. She ate a piece of peach. The sweetness of it was almost violent. Too much, too direct, after days of nothing. She let it sit on her tongue for a moment before she let herself swallow. "Nala," she said. Her own name in this room, spoken to this stranger, felt strange. Like something she had put down somewhere and was picking back up and could not quite remember the exact weight of. He nodded, still with his back to her. "I knew a man once," he said, "who could not speak, and I could not speak his language. We worked side by side for 3 weeks. Never managed a conversation. But we worked." He paused. "I'm telling you that because I don't know how much English you have. I'm not going to talk at you. But I'm also not going to be silent the whole time. It seems discourteous. So, you can just ignore what you don't understand." She understood most of that. More than he probably expected. She said nothing. He finally turned around to face her. He looked at the photograph on the shelf, then back at her. Something moved through his expression, complex and layered and gone too fast to fully read. "My wife," he said, "and my daughter." He did not elaborate. His voice on those 2 words was careful, in the way that people are careful around wounds, that are still open enough to reopen easily if you move too fast. She looked at the photograph, then back at him. "Dead," she understood. "You do not speak of the living in that particular careful voice." 3 years ago, he said. "Yellow fever." She did not know yellow fever, but she understood 3 years ago, and she understood the rest from his face. He stood up. "I'll sleep on the floor," he said. "You take the bed." He pulled a blanket from the chest at the foot of the bed, unrolled it beside the stove. Without fuss, without making it into a demonstration of his own generosity. She watched him. He lay down on the floor and pulled the blanket over Alice himself and said, "Good night, Nala." She sat upright against the wall for a long time. The coyotes started somewhere out in the dark. Their voices moved across the desert like something being carried by the wind. She knew their calls the way she knew most things out here, by type, by distance, by what they communicated to each other in the frequencies between what humans could parse. "We are here," the coyotes said. "We are here and the night is ours, and we are not afraid of the dark." She had always appreciated that about coyotes. After a while, she lay down. Not because she trusted this room, not because she was comfortable, but because her body had a different opinion than her vigilance, and her body was making a compelling case. She kept her ears open. She kept track of his breathing from the floor, slow, even. Asleep within minutes, the way people sleep, when they are genuinely tired rather than performing sleep. The knife was still in the desert, 2 hours east. She closed her eyes. And for the first time in 3 days, she did not think about the knife. Morning arrived with birds she did not recognize from this particular valley. Small ones, territorial. They made their arguments in the branches of the single cottonwood tree near the well, and the arguments echoed off the adobe wall of the house and came in through the window as something almost cheerful. Beckett was already up when she opened her eyes. She heard him outside, movement, the sound of the well rope, the horses greeting him. The ordinary sounds of a man beginning his workday. She pulled herself to sitting. She did this in stages, the way she had learned to do it, not fighting her body's new limitations, not pretending they did not exist, but also not collapsing to accommodate them. There was a middle path. She had been finding it for 8 months. She assessed the room in morning light, more visible than last night. The details she had filed in the dark, now confirmed and added to. The nails on the wall where a coat hung, the pair of worn boots beside the door, the stack of papers on the table corner that she could not read, but which looked like account ledgers. A man of practical habits. A man who kept track of things on the shelf, the photograph of the woman and girl. In morning light, she could see them more clearly. The woman was laughing at whoever held the camera. Not a posed laugh, an actual one caught mid-sentence. The girl was maybe 5 years old and was looking at her mother with an expression of absolute and uncomplicated adoration. Nala looked at this for a long moment, then looked away. Beckett came back inside, carrying water. He set it near the stove. Started a fire with the practiced efficiency of someone who had done this 10,000 times and did not need to think about it anymore. Put coffee on. Cut bread, you sleep? He asked. Without looking up, some, she said. He glanced at her then. Something brief but assessing. Checking. The way you check on a person in the morning after a crisis, without making the checking into a production. Can you move yourself to the chair? He asked. Or, I will show you, she said. And she moved herself to the chair. It was not graceful. It involved pulling herself with her arms and repositioning with her hands in a sequence that she had developed slowly over 8 months of figuring out what her body could still do. It was not elegant, but it was hers. She sat in the chair. He put coffee in front of her. Bread. The dried meat from last night. He sat across from her and ate his own breakfast. They were quiet for a while. I need to ride out today, he said eventually. Check the east fence. I'll be back by midday, he looked at her. Is that? He stopped, reformulated. There's food in the tins on the second shelf. Water from the jug near the window. You'll be fine, she said. He nodded. The door doesn't lock from the inside, he said. I'll leave you my rifle. She looked at him. He looked back. Something in that exchange, the offer and the receipt of it, passed between them like a document being signed, like terms being agreed to, not between enemies, but between two people who were still figuring out what exactly they were to each other. He left. She sat in the chair by the window and watched him ride east until the dust settled behind him. Then she looked around the room. Then she started to clean it, not because he had asked, not because she owed him. She started to clean it because she was Apache, and Apache did not sit still when there was work in arm for each, and because the motion of her hands on useful tasks was the thing that had kept her sane for 8 months when everything else had been stripped away. She could not reach everything. The shelves above a certain height were beyond her. The top of the stove would have to wait. But the table she could clear and wipe. The floor she could sweep with a broom she found in the corner, pulling herself along behind it by stages, slowly, methodically. She found a loose button on the coat hanging by the door. She found the sewing kit on the bottom shelf. Of course, it was on the bottom shelf. He was a practical man. And she sat and she sewed the button back on with the small, careful stitches her mother had shown her. She looked around the room when she was done. Better. Not perfect, but better. She sat back in the chair and looked at the photograph. He is lonely, she thought, in Apache. Because some thoughts needed their home language. He is the kind of lonely that gets into the walls of a place. That is in the air. You could feel it when you walked in. She knew this kind of lonely because she had been learning it for 8 months. We are alike in this, she thought. And then she thought, that is enough for now. That is enough to work with. When he came back at midday and found the table clean, and his coat on the hook with its button repaired, and a pot of something on the stove that she had managed with the ingredients she could reach, he stopped in the doorway. He looked at the room. He looked at her. He looked at the pot on the stove. He said nothing for a long moment. Then he said, "You didn't have to." "I know," she said. He sat down at the table. She had already worked out the mechanics of getting the pot to the table. It had taken some thought, some creative use of a stool as a rolling surface, some patience. The solution was not elegant. It had worked. He ate. She sat across from him and ate her portion. "It's good," he said. She nodded. They were quiet again. But the quiet had changed since this morning, slightly. The way the light changes in the late afternoon. Same room, same furniture, but different quality to everything, because the source of light has shifted. After a while, he pushed back from the table and looked at her with an expression she was beginning to recognize as his thinking face, though one he wore when he was working something out that he was not sure how to put into words. "I don't know how long you're planning to stay," he said carefully, "and I'm not. I'm not making demands about it. He exhaled. "What I'm trying to say is, you can stay as long as you need. There's no—" He stopped again. She watched him labor with the English. "No debt," she said. He blinked, then said yes. "Exactly. No debt." She looked at him for a moment, then looked out the window at the desert. She thought, 8 months ago, I had a name and a purpose, and the use of my legs, and a people who knew me. Now I have a room in a stranger's house, and a chair by a window, and this man's awkward kindness and nothing else." She thought, "This is what I have. This is what there is," she thought. "All right then. This is where I begin." That evening, after supper, he pointed at the lamp on the table. "Lamp," he said. She looked at him, understanding the exercise immediately. She had done this before, not with English, but with other bands, other dialects. The slow, patient work of building a shared language out of almost nothing. "Lamp," she repeated. The sound was strange in her mouth. Angular where Apache was fluid, he pointed at the window. 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 He pointed at his own chest. Beckett. She allowed herself the smallest possible version of a smile. "I know this one." His expression shifted. Surprise. Then something that took her a moment to identify, because it had been a long time since she had seen it on a face aimed at her. Amusement. He was amused. "Fair enough," he said. She pointed at herself. "Nala," she said. And then, in Apache, Shikis, he looked at her. "What does that mean, my friend?" she said, in English. Trying each syllable separately, he was quiet for a moment. "Shikis," he repeated carefully, getting the sounds almost right. She nodded. Outside, the desert went dark. The stars came out in the particular thick, unobstructed way they came out over flat desert. Not scattered but dense, layered, so many of them that they stopped being countable and became instead a quality of the darkness itself. She had always loved the Arizona stars. Even now. Still, the coyotes started again, further south tonight. Their voices moved across the dark with their usual confident ownership of the night. And, somewhere in the house, the wood in the stove settled and shifted, and the lamp threw its small circle of light across the table. And Beckett Rourke picked up his coffee and looked out the window at the dark. And Nala sat in her chair and looked at the photograph on the shelf. The woman in the photograph was still laughing, and for the first time in 8 months, Nala thought, maybe not yet. Maybe there is still something on the other side of this. Maybe tomorrow is worth waiting for after all. She did not say this out loud. She looked out the window at the stars instead, and breathed. The morning they rode into Ashford Crossing together, the whole town stopped. Not exaggerating, stopped. The man hammering at the post in front of the hardware store just stopped hammering, mid-swing. The 2 women coming out of the general store stood on the steps and did not move. The 3 men playing cards on the saloon porch let their cards fall to the table and simply looked. Beckett had warned her. He had used simple English and some gestures and a certain flatness in his expression that communicated, I am telling you something true and not pleasant. He had said, the town is not friendly to strangers. He had said, Apache especially. He had said, it will not be a comfortable trip. She had pointed at the door. She was going. She was not going to sit in this house like a secret, like something that needed to be hidden. She had been hidden before, filed away in categories of worthlessness by people who should have known better. and she was done with the architecture of hiding. If this town had opinions about her, she preferred to give them the opportunity to have those opinions in her presence. Beckett had looked at her for a moment when she pointed at the door. Then, he had gone to saddle the horse. She sat in front of him on the saddle, the way they had ridden from the desert. He had devised a system over the past weeks, a way of securing her on the horse that left her hands free and kept her balanced, practical and unobtrusive. She had watched him work out mechanics of it without comment. He had not asked her if she was comfortable with it. He had built it and offered it and let her decide. She had decided to use it. Now they moved down the main street of Ashford Crossing, and every eye in the visible world was on them. She sat straight. She looked forward. She let her gaze move across the storefronts and the faces, and the various expressions of shock and hostility and plain astonishment, without any of it registering in her own face as anything other than information being filed. She heard what they said. Some of it. She caught words she recognized. Apache crippled, Beckett, what in God's? And words she didn't. But the tone of all of it was consistent and clear, and she had enough experience with that particular tone to know exactly what it meant. Let them, she thought. Let them, she thought. Let them look. Beckett pulled up at the general store. He climbed down and carried her inside, with the same deliberate normalcy he applied to everything. Not performing for the crowd, not flinching from them, just doing the thing that needed to be done. The store owner, a round man with an expression currently cycling through several emotions at once, started talking before they were fully through the door. Beckett listened to approximately 6 words of it. Then he said, with a specific quietness that was louder than shouting would have been, "She has a name. It's Nahla. And you're going to treat her with respect, or we're going to shop somewhere else." The store owner swallowed. Nahla watched this. She watched a man she had known for less than a month tell a stranger to respect her, not because she had asked him to, not because it was required of him, just because he had decided that it was the minimum standard of decent behavior, and he was not willing to conduct business below it. Something moved through her chest at this. Quiet and complicated. She did not name it. Not yet. The man who introduced himself as Delwood Vance was waiting outside when they came back from the store. He was not what she expected. She had expected. Based on Beckett's warning, the careful way he had spoken the man's name, the particular tension that came into his jaw at the mention of him. She had expected someone who looked threatening, who carried his power visibly. Vance was not like that. He was tall, well-dressed in a way that was careful without being showy. He had a pleasant face, a controlled, pleasant face of the kind that takes a long time and considerable effort to develop. The face of a man who has learned to keep the interesting parts of himself behind a consistently agreeable surface. "Beckett," he said, warm, like they were old friends. "Haven't seen you in a while," Delwood Beckett said. Vance looked at Nahla. His expression when he looked at her was exactly calibrated, not hostile, not dismissive. Curious in a performance of curiosity. The look of a man who is deciding how to file a new piece of information. "This must be your guest," Vance said. "I've been hearing about her. Have you?" Beckett said. "A lot of people have been hearing about her." Vance smiled. It was a very good smile. "I want to make you an offer, Beckett. For the land. Fair price. More than fair." He named a number. Beckett said, "No." Vance tilted his head slightly, like a man recalibrating. "Sleep on it? My answer doesn't change while I sleep," Beckett said. Vance looked at him. The pleasant surface held. But underneath it, she saw it, just briefly, just a flicker. Something else. Not anger. Something colder than anger. "I'm patient," Vance said. "That's one thing people will tell you about me, Beckett. I'm very patient." He touched the brim of his hat, nodded at Nahla, polite, smooth, practiced, and walked away. She watched him go. She watched the way he moved, unhurried, assured, the walk of someone who has never had to accommodate anyone else's pace. "I know this man," she thought. Not this specific man, the shape of him, the category, the man who smiles while he takes things, who makes it easy for you to hand things over by never quite showing you the mechanism by which he's removing them. She had known men like this. They were always the most dangerous kind. Sheriff Grove Parish found Beckett before they left town. He was a decent-looking man, the sheriff. 50 or so, with the kind of face that honest work builds. Not handsome, but solid. Trustworthy in his bone structure, which Nala recognized as something distinct from trustworthy in his choices. He spoke to Beckett privately, a few steps away. She could not hear all of it. But she caught enough. Vance. Careful. Not just about you. About her. About what he might decide to use this for. Beckett listened, nodded. Looked at the sheriff with an expression that said, he already knew all of this, and was also going to do exactly what he intended to do regardless. The sheriff sighed the sigh of a man who has reached his limit of useful things to say, and is now watching helplessly, while a person he respects continues in a direction that frightens him. He looked at Nala directly. For a moment, she looked back. She did not look away. He seemed to make some small internal adjustment in response to this. A recategorization. Then he went. Beckett came back to her. What did he say? She asked. Beckett was quiet for a moment. Honest. He said Vance is dangerous. And that having you here makes you a target and me a target, and that maybe he could not protect us if things got complicated. She absorbed this. And you, she said. I said, thank you for the warning, Beckett said. He picked her up back on the horse and mounted behind her, and they started the ride back home. Twang my back home. Back. She had thought that word automatically, and then noticed she had thought it. Back home. She sat with that for a while. With the complexity and the weight of it. Home. That word. The things it contained. The things it used to contain that it no longer contained, and the question of whether it could be rebuilt around something new. Whether it was even the same word once you rebuilt it. Whether you got to call it the same thing. The desert opened out around them. The late afternoon light went gold on the red rock formations to the north. The horses moved at an easy pace, unhurried, knowing the route. She looked at the photograph on the shelf of her memory. The woman laughing. The small girl looking upward. She looked at the road ahead. All right, she thought. All right. We will see what comes next. September came to Arizona like an apology. The brutal white heat of August softened at its edges. Not gone. Not even close to gone, but different. The mornings had something in them. Now, a quality of air before the sun fully committed to the day's punishment. A reminder that the world contained temperatures other than the one it had been holding for months. Nala noticed this from the window every morning. She had become a person who noticed things from windows. This was new. This was something she was still deciding how to feel about. 8 months of learning to live on the ground had taught patience with this. Before the bullet, before everything, she had been a person who moved, who thought through her feet, who worked problems out by covering distance. Sitting had always felt like waiting for something else to begin. Now sitting was the thing itself. She was learning to make it enough. Some days she succeeded. The rhythm of the ranch had settled around both of them like a river finding its banks. Beckett woke before the light. She heard him, the floor, the boots, the door, the particular sound of a man beginning work with the focused quiet of someone who has done these same motions. So many times they no longer require thought. The horses knew his footsteps. She could hear them greet him from the corral. That low rumble of recognition that horses make for people they trust. By the time the sun was fully up, she had made her way to the chair by the window and started whatever task she had assigned herself. She was on to the mending now. He had a pile of it. Shirts with split seams, work pants with torn knees, a vest with a broken button that he had apparently been ignoring for some time. She worked through it methodically. Her hands were good at this. Her hands had always been good at precise, patient work. Tracking, stringing bows, reading soil, sowing, all the same basic competency in different forms. Hands that knew how to be careful, how to read small things, how to make something that held. He came in at midday and found the pile diminished, and her in the chair, with needle and thread and a shirt spread across her lap. He looked at it. He looked at her. "You're going to run out of things to fix," he said. "I will find more," she said, which was true. There was always more. A house that had been maintained by one set of hands for 3 years had accumulated a patient backlog of small necessary things. She was working through them in order of urgency, the way she had always prioritized tasks in the field. He sat down at the table, ate the food she had made from the available ingredients. She was getting better at working with what the shelves offered, learning the logic of his pantry, developing an understanding of what he kept and why, and how to combine it into something worth eating. "The fence on the east pasture is going," he said. It was not a complaint, just information being filed. "How long?" she asked. He considered this. 2 weeks before it's a real problem." She nodded. Filed this too. They ate in the comfortable quiet that had grown between them over weeks of shared meals. Not empty quiet. Not the silence of people with nothing to say. The silence of people who had stopped needing to fill space with sound in order to prove the other person was still there. She had not expected to find this particular quality of company. She had not known she was missing it until she found it again. The trouble started small, which is how trouble always starts. A fence post on the west boundary, pulled from the ground and left on its side. Not fallen, the ground around it was undisturbed. Someone had wrapped hands around it and pulled. Deliberate, unhurried, the message of it calm and clear. "We can reach you here," Beckett showed her when he came in. Set the post against the wall without comment. His jaw was doing the thing it did. Not clenching, not dramatic, just set. A small, deliberate setting of the jaw that she had learned to read as the external sign of an internal decision being made. "Vance," she said. "Not a question, most likely," he said. She looked at the post. At the clean, pulled-out base of it. At the roots of grass, still clinging to the dirt around where it had been seeded. "How many men does he have?" she asked. He thought. "On the payroll? 30 or so. Working men, mostly. But he can hire more, has before." He looked at her. "He's done this to others. In the county, bought them out or worn them down until they sold. And the sheriff?" "Parrish is honest," Beckett said. "But honest and effective aren't always the same thing when the other man has more resources." She understood this. She had understood the geometry of power imbalances her entire life. The Chiricahua had been navigating them for generations. The particular calculation of when to fight, and when to wait, and when to find the third option that neither side had thought of yet. She said, "Then we think." He looked at her. "Before we react," she said. "We think." Something moved across his face. Not quite a smile, but close. 3 days later, one of the calves was found at the fence line dead, not by predator. Predators leave a specific kind of evidence. Drag marks, scattered evidence of panic, opportunistic feeding. This was clean, too clean. The way death looks when it has been administered deliberately rather than hungrily. Beckett stood over it for a long time. She watched him from where she had positioned herself on a flat rock. He had started bringing her out, to the pasture on the horse in the mornings. A practical solution to her need to be outside and her inability to get there herself. She had not asked for this. He had simply started doing it one day, and she had simply started allowing it, and neither of them had commented on the arrangement. She watched him stand over the dead calf and be very still. He is angry, she thought. But he is not going to let himself be angry yet. He is cataloging first. He is trying to stay in the part of his brain that counts and measures, before he lets himself into the part that feels. She knew this strategy. She used it herself. After a while, he walked back to her. "Sheriff came out yesterday," he said. "When I sent for him about the fence post." He looked. He wrote things down. He said he'd look into it and... Beckett exhaled through his nose. And nothing yet. She looked out at the pasture. At the flat, patient distances of the Arizona landscape. He is waiting for us to make a mistake, she said. Vance. He is waiting for you to react before you think, because a man who reacts gives him something to use. Beckett looked at her. You sound like you've seen this before, he said. Yes, she said. Simply, without elaboration. Because the elaboration of what she had seen, the years of watching people with more institutional power, use that power not in direct confrontation, but in accumulated pressure, in small removals, in the patient erosion of everything, that made a place feel like yours, that elaboration would take longer than either of them had energy for right now. So what do we do? He asked. We make it harder to reach us, she said. And we pay attention, and we wait for him to be the one who makes a mistake first. He was quiet for a moment. All right, he said. She started teaching him, not formally, not as a declared thing. Just when she noticed something worth noticing, she said so. When he came in from the east boundary, she asked what he had seen, and then told him what the signs he had missed meant. When he was working in the barn, she positioned herself at the window and watched the approach roads and told him, in the evening, what she had observed. He listened. That was the thing about Beckett Rourke that she had been noting and re-noting since the beginning. He listened. Not performatively. Not the way people listen when they are waiting for their turn to speak. He listened the way she listened. Gathering, absorbing, fitting new information into existing structures. She showed him the places around the ranch perimeter where approach could be hidden. The low wash on the northwest that could shelter horses if someone came from that direction, the rock, outcropping on the east that gave a clear view of the road but was itself invisible from the road. He began checking these positions daily. She showed him which cans from the store cupboard, arranged in a specific way at the base of the west gate, would make noise if the gate was opened. A simple thing, almost childishly simple. But effective, Apache? He said, looking at the arrangement. Practical. She said. He almost smiled. She found herself almost smiling back. And then she found herself looking at this. At the two of them, in the morning light, standing over a collection of tin cans that constituted a defense strategy. Almost smiling at each other, and thinking, when did this become the shape of my days? When did this become the thing I am doing? And what do I call it? She did not have an answer. She went back inside and picked up the mending. Edna Parrish came on a Thursday. Nala heard the horse first. Single rider, easy pace, no urgency in the gait. She positioned herself where she could see the window and the door simultaneously. Old habit, honest habit. The woman who dismounted was small, compact in the way of people who have learned to carry themselves efficiently. 50 or so. A face that had lines in it, but the lines were not from worry. They were from weather and decision, and the particular creasing that comes from years of expressing yourself without apology. She carried a basket over one arm, with the domestic authority of someone who had been bringing baskets to people's houses for decades. She knocked on the door. Beckett opened it. Edna, he said. Something shifted in his expression, not unwelcoming, but surprised. Beckett, she looked past him at Nala without a pause. Without the recalibration Nala had learned to watch for. The split second of adjustment most people performed when they saw her, when they processed her and reclassified and decided what expression to wear. Edna Parrish looked at Nala and said, "You must be Nala." "Grove told me about you," Nala said. "The sheriff's wife, the very same." She held up the basket. "I brought bread, and I brought medicine, because Grove said there were wounds from the fence post incident. And I told him, I said, 'Grove, those things don't see to themselves.' And then I came myself, because telling Grove to do something medical is like asking a rock to perform surgery." She walked in, set the basket on the table. Started unpacking it, with the efficiency of someone who knows exactly what she packed. and where she put it, and is not interested in conducting this operation slowly. Beckett looked at Nala. Nala looked at Edna. Edna looked at neither of them and said, "Sit down, both of you. Beckett, you have a cut on your arm that you've been ignoring for 3 days, and—" she looked at Nala with direct, uncomplicated eyes. "I'd like to look at your back. Grove said you were left in the desert. That kind of injury can have complications that creep up quietly." "I am managing," Nala said. "I know you are," Edna said, without the slightest implication of argument. "I'd still like to look." Nala considered this woman. This small, efficient woman who had walked into a stranger's house and was already reorganizing the table and would apparently not be taking no for an answer, but was doing it all with such complete absence of condescension that it was almost impossible to object to. "All right," Nala said. Beckett made coffee. Edna examined Nala's back with careful hands and quiet attention. She did not make sounds of dismay. She did not offer running commentary on what she found. She simply looked and pressed gently at intervals, and made small specific notes to herself that she translated into equally small specific actions. The application of a salve, the replacement of a dressing Nala had been managing herself. "You've been keeping this clean," Edna said. "Yes, good." She sat back. "The wound itself is healed well. The damage underneath is—" She stopped. "Permanent," Nala said. Edna looked at her directly. "Yes, I know this," Nala said. "I know you do," Edna said. And then, without transition, without sentimentality, "You've been managing this place. The mending and the meals and the position of those tin cans at the gate, which Grove thinks is very clever, by the way." "It is very clever," Nala said. Edna smiled. It was a good smile. "Real." "Yes, it is." She paused, folded her hands in her lap. "I want to ask you something, and I want you to know you don't have to answer it. But I think you're someone who prefers a direct question to a conversation that works around it." Nala said nothing, which was its own kind of answer. "What do you know about Delwood Vance?" Edna asked. The name went up between them for a moment. "I know he wants this land," Nala said. "Yes? And?" She looked at Edna. Read her face. The careful, interested, direct face of a woman who already knew something and was deciding whether to share it. "You know something," Nala said. Edna exhaled. "Grove has files, court records, land disputes, army contracts going back 15 years. He's meticulous. He doesn't always know what he has until something makes it relevant." She paused. "Delwood Vance's name appears in a military contract from the fall of 1876. A scouting contract for information provided about the location of Apache camps in the Southern Territory." The room was very quiet. Beckett had gone still near the stove. Nala's hands, which had been resting in her lap, stayed exactly where they were. She did not move them. She did not change the position of a single finger. Because she had learned, a long time ago, that when something enormous comes at you, the first job is to let it arrive before you decide what to do with it. "The fall of 1876, she said. Her voice came out even. She was aware of this. She had done that deliberately. "September," Edna said quietly. "September 1876. The attack had been in October." She heard it again, not as memory exactly. More like the memory of a sound. The impossible accuracy of soldiers who should not have known where to come. The way the chief's face had looked. "Not surprised? He has names?" she asked. "In the files?" "Grove has a name," Edna said. "He wasn't certain of its significance until I started asking questions." She looked at Nala with steady eyes. "Until you arrived here, and I started paying attention to why Vance wants this land so badly. Why this land specifically? Why now? Why now? Because she was here. Because Delwood Vance knew she was here. And Delwood Vance knew what she had seen. What she had noticed in the chaos of an attack that had been too precise to be accidental. She was a witness. Not to a land dispute. To something much larger and much older and much more dangerous than that. "Your husband," she said to Edna. "He will act on this?" Edna's expression did something complicated, honest. The expression of a woman who loves her husband and is also clear-eyed about the exact contours of what he can and cannot do. Grove is a good man, she said. He's also a sheriff in a county where Vance has more money than the county itself. He needs, she paused, he needs something solid, something that can't be explained away or bought away. Nala looked at the table. She thought about the chief's face. She thought about October 1876. She thought about the weight of a secret held for 8 months by a body that had paid the price of that secret in a very literal and specific way. I know what I saw, she said. Yes, said Edna, I thought you might. She did not tell Beckett that night, not because she was hiding it from him, because she needed to hold it herself first, turn it in her hands, understand all its dimensions before she put it in front of another person. This was how she had always worked with difficult information. You carry it alone first. You take its full weight before you ask someone else to help you with the load. Because you cannot know what you are asking someone to carry until you know what it weighs yourself. She lay in the dark and she held it. Delwood Vance. A name in a military contract. September 1876. She went through it again, as she had gone through it many times in 8 months, without knowing the final pieces of it, the attack, the precision, the chief's face, the bullet. And now, the name that connected the precision to the money to the face to the silence she had been left in the desert to become. He did not want you dead because you could not walk. He wanted you dead because you could talk. She told Beckett in the morning. She waited until he had finished his coffee. She had learned this about him. He was a better listener after coffee. Not that he was difficult before, just more available after. More settled into the day. She told him the whole of it, what Edna had said, what she had seen at the attack, what it meant. When you put those two pieces together, he listened without interrupting. When she finished, he set his cup down. Looked at the table for a long time. Vance had your band's location sold to the Army, he said. Not a question. Just saying it out loud. Because some things need to be said out loud before they become real. Yes. And that's why you're chief. Yes. He was quiet again. So this isn't just about my land, he said. It was never just about your land, she said. But now you know why I am the particular problem I am. Why it is not enough for him to simply buy you out. Why I need to be, she stopped. Gone, Beckett said. Gone. She agreed. Or silent, he stood up, walked to the window, looked out at the desert with his hands at his sides and his jaw doing its thing. She watched him. She watched him take this information apart and put it back together. Watch him find all the ways it changed, the shape of the situation, all the ways it made things larger and more dangerous than they had been 5 minutes ago. She waited, because he was going to say something now. He was going to say the thing that would tell her everything she needed to know about what came next, and she needed to hear it without having influenced it, without having looked at him in a way that suggested what she needed the answer to be. He turned around. Okay, he said. Just that. Okay, she repeated. We're going to need more than tin cans, he said, and she felt something in her chest, something that had been wound very tight for a very long time. Ease. Just slightly. Just enough. The rain came that night, real rain. Not the spitting, half-hearted gestures the desert made most of the year. This was the full monsoon trailing edge. Sheets of it coming sideways off the mountains, drumming on the roof of the house, with the insistent percussion of something that had been saving itself up for a while. Beckett lit the lamp and they sat at the table in the sound of the rain, and he opened a box she had never seen before. He put it on the table between them, and he sat there looking at it for a moment before he opened it. She did not ask what was inside. He opened it. Inside was a letter, folded multiple times. Old, the paper had gone soft at the creases, had taken on the particular quality of paper that has been handled many times without being opened, touched without being read. He picked it up, set it down, picked it up again. My wife, he said. She wrote this before she got sick. She was going to send it to her sister in Missouri. She never did. He paused. I found it in the lining of her traveling bag. About a month after she died. He stopped. Nala was very still. I've never been able to open it, he said. 3 years. I've been carrying it for 3 years without. He exhaled. I don't know why tonight. I don't know why. You don't have to, she said. I know, he looked at the letter. Then at her. But I think I want to. She waited. He opened it. He read in silence. She watched his face the way she watched landscape. For the information in it, the topography of what was moving through him. He read slowly. The rain kept on. The lamp threw its circle. His face moved through things she could not fully name from where she sat. And then he stopped. He looked up. His eyes were different. Something had come into them and was sitting there. Large and quiet, like water filling a vessel. She writes about. He stopped, cleared his throat. She says she's been thinking. About children. After they got settled here, she wanted to. She says she wanted to take in a child. That didn't have anyone. She writes. He stopped again, swallowed. He held the letter out to her. She looked at it. She could not read English well enough for cursive. Especially not this cursive. Personal, fast, the handwriting of someone composing thoughts quickly before they lost them. She writes. He said, his voice very careful, very controlled, that it didn't matter where the child came from. That a child without anyone was a child without anyone. And that there was enough room in this house. He set the letter down. She writes, exactly. The desert is full of people who have been left, Beckett. It seems to me like why have room for one of them. The rain. Just the rain. For a long moment, she looked at the letter on the table. At his hands flat on either side of it. At his face with the water in his eyes that he was not letting fall. She thought about the woman in the photograph, laughing. Looking at whoever held the camera with complete, unguarded openness, she thought, I would have liked her. She thought she would have understood this. She sounds, Nala said carefully, like someone who saw things clearly. She did, Beckett said. She always did. She saw things I missed. He paused. She would have. He stopped. Yes, Nala said quietly, without knowing exactly what he was going to say. But knowing it was true, he folded the letter back along its old creases, placed it back in the box, closed the lid. The rain kept on. Neither of them spoke for a while. Which was, she was learning, one of the particular graces of this particular silence between them, that it could hold things. Large things. Things that did not fit neatly into words. It had room. The desert is full of people who have been left. And we have room for one of them. She sat in that room, in that rain, in that house that had learned to hold the weight of 2 broken people. And she thought, I am not the same person who lay in the desert 3 days from the end of everything. I do not know yet who I am now, but I am not that person anymore. The letter from Vance came on a Monday. Not a real letter, a note. Delivered by a man on a hired horse, who left it at the gate without dismounting and rode back toward town before Beckett had reached the gate to collect it. Beckett read it, handed it to her without comment. She could read enough English now to get the substance. The substance was 30 days. The county had filed a review of the land deed on the basis of a technical error in the original survey. The review would require an independent assessment. The assessment would be conducted by assessors appointed by the county office. Vance owned the county office. She read it twice. Then she set it on the table. He is tired of waiting, she said. He is, Beckett said. He is using the law instead of men, she said. Because men failed. Because men are messier, Beckett said. Because men leave evidence. She looked at the note. At the language of it, official, clean, procedural. The language of a machine that had been bought and repurposed without leaving any fingerprints on the transaction. Can you fight it? She asked. The legal claim, he exhaled. I don't have a lawyer. The only one in Ashford Crossing is Vance's, she thought. Edna Parrish. She said he looked at her. She collected files, Nala said. Your sheriff collects files. If the name Vance appears in a military contract, that is a federal document. That is not a county document. That does not belong to Vance to control. Something moved through Beckett's expression. The particular movement of a person seeing a shape in what looked like solid rock. If Grove takes those files to a federal circuit judge. Not a county judge, she said. No, he said. Not a county judge. He was quiet, thinking fast. She could see him thinking fast. The specific quality of attention a person has when they are running ahead of themselves. It's not enough to stop the land claim on its own. But if the federal contract connects to the attack in October, it is a pattern, she said. A man who buys information from an army does not do it once. A man like that does it many times. The files may show more than one contract. He looked at her. You knew this when you talked to Edna. I thought about it, she said. Carefully. You've been thinking about it since. Yes, he was quiet. You weren't going to tell me, he said. Not accusatory. Genuinely curious, I was waiting, she said, to see if it became necessary, and now? She tapped the note on the table. Now it is necessary. He sat across from her and looked at her for a moment in that particular way he had. Direct. Unhurried. The look of a man who has learned that looking at people carefully is more useful than most other things. You know, he said. Most people, when they were left in the desert to die, would spend some time afterward not strategizing. She looked at him. I am Apache, she said. He shook his head. But there was something in it. Something that was not quite exasperation and not quite admiration, and landed somewhere in the specific territory where those two things overlapped. They went to see Edna Parrish that afternoon. The sheriff's house was at the edge of Ashford Crossing, set back from the main street. A garden in front, deliberate, tended. The kind of garden that said someone here believes in tomorrow. Vegetables, a few flowers, a rain barrel under the porch eave. Edna answered the door before they knocked. She had seen them coming. Of course she had. I was wondering when you'd be back, she said. Come in. Grove Parrish was at the table. He looked up when they entered. At Beckett. At Nala. At the note Beckett laid on the table between them. He read it, he set it down. He looked like a man who had been hoping something would not happen, and it had happened anyway. 30 days, he said. He is using the county office, Beckett said. I know. Parrish rubbed his face. I know he is. I've been watching him build toward this for a while. He looked at Beckett with the direct, honest look of a man delivering news he wishes he did not have. Beckett, even if I took everything I have on Vance to a circuit court today, the timeline for federal review is not 30 days. It's months, maybe longer. The land claim would go through first, Beckett said. Yes, silence. Nala had been watching Grove Parrish during this exchange, reading him the way she read landscape. The honest man who had said honest and effective aren't the same thing. She was measuring now whether that assessment was complete or whether she had missed something. Sheriff, she said. He looked at her. You said you need something solid, she said. Something that cannot be bought, yes. A witness is solid, she said. He was very still. What kind of witness? The kind that was there, she said. The kind that saw what happened and survived to say so. She held his eyes. I know what I saw in October of 1876. I know the position soldiers came from. I know that the approach routes they used required exact prior knowledge of our camp's location. I know what the chief's face looked like when the attack began. She paused. I know what I know, and I can say it. In front of a federal judge, I can say it. Parrish looked at her, not at Beckett, not at the situation. At her. You understand, he said carefully, that the testimony of an Apache woman in a federal court in 1877 is not nothing, she said, if it is supported by documents that already exist in your files. If it is corroborated by a military contract with a name on it. If it is part of a pattern and not an isolated claim. She paused. I know how courts work. I know what testimony needs around it to be believed. I am not offering you a story. I am offering you a piece of evidence that fits with what you already have." The room was quiet for a moment, then Edna sat down across from Nala and folded her hands on the table and looked at her with an expression that was warm and direct, and not without a specific kind of respect. "Tell us what you saw," Edna said. And Nala told them. She talked for a long time. She told it in order, chronologically, the way a tracker reports: movement, position, timing, observation. Not emotion, observation. The soldiers had come from the north, in 2 groups. She knew this because she had been on the East Ridge at the moment the attack began, and had a clear line of sight to both approaches. The northern group had split at the juniper stand above the main camp, a specific split point that would only be chosen by someone who had prior knowledge of the camp layout, because from outside the valley, you could not see the juniper stand. You had to have been told it was there. The chief had not moved to alert the camp in the first seconds. She had watched this. Specifically, the first shots had been fired before he gave the warning call. A man who was surprised gives the warning call first. A man who is bracing gives it second. Parrish wrote. He wrote for a long time. His handwriting was careful, deliberate. The handwriting of a man who understood that written things outlast spoken things and tried to do justice to both. When she finished, he sat back and looked at what he had. Then at Edna, then at Beckett, then at Nala. "This is enough to open a federal inquiry," he said. "I cannot promise you more than that. But an inquiry that changes the timeline. An active federal inquiry on a party creates complications for them. Land claims, legal filings, they draw scrutiny during an active inquiry." He paused. "It buys time." "How much time?" Beckett said. "Enough," Parrish said. "Maybe enough." Nala sat in the sheriff's kitchen in Ashford Crossing, Arizona Territory, in the fall of 1877 and thought, enough. Sometimes enough is all you need. Enough to work with, enough to keep going. They were 2 miles from the ranch when the riders appeared on the ridge. Not 1 or 2. Not a scouting party, many. Nala counted from the horse. 13, 15. More appearing as the ridge cleared. Men on horseback, positioned in a line along the high ground to the north. Not moving yet. Just visible. The way a force presents itself when it wants to be seen before it needs to be used. She felt Beckett's arms tighten slightly around the reins. She felt his breathing change. "Just barely. I count 16, she said quietly. 17, he said. "There's one behind the rock formation at the east end." She had not seen that one. She noted this, filed it. "He is not waiting anymore," she said. "No," Beckett said. "He's not." She looked at the ranch ahead of them. The fence line, the gate with its tin can arrangement, the barn with the hayloft that gave a clear sight line to 3 of the 4 approach routes. The flat rock formation to the southwest that she had spent several mornings examining and had identified as the best defensive position on the entire property. She had been doing this for weeks, learning the terrain around the ranch the way she had always learned terrain, patiently, specifically, without knowing exactly when she would need it, but knowing she would need it. She needed it now. "Ride straight to the gate," she said, normal pace. "Do not look at them again, Nala." "They are establishing position," she said. "They are not moving yet. They want us to see them. They want us to react. Do not react." "Ride to the gate." A pause. He rode to the gate. She kept her back straight and her eyes forward and did not look at the ridge, and she felt the eyes on her, 17 pairs of eyes, and she did not acknowledge them. She had walked through the middle of things that wanted to frighten her before. The key was the same as it had always been. Give them nothing, absolutely nothing, and think. They passed through the gate. He dismounted and handed her down, and she was inside the barn and giving him the tactical picture before he had fully closed the door, the wash on the northwest. They would not approach from there. It was too exposed and too slow for horses. The main road, they would expect defense there, which meant they might use it as a feint. The east approach along the dry creek bed, concealed, fast. Hard to defend from inside the house. The rock formation, she said. You've looked at it before, he said, many times. She said. Two people with rifles in that position can cover the creek bed and the north fence simultaneously. It is also outside the sight line from the main road. He was looking at her. You've been planning this, he said. I have been thinking, she said. There is a difference, he almost laughed. A short sound, surprised out of him. And then he was serious again, and she was serious. And they both understood that the night ahead of them was not something that could be laughed at. And they began to prepare. Hey, she did not sleep that night. Neither did he. They took turns, watching from the window. 2-hour shifts, each coming off the watch to sit in the chair and stare at the ceiling and listen to the other one, listening to the dark. Nothing came, but the feeling of the ridge hung over the house all night. The knowledge of the 17 men who had positioned themselves and waited and were patient in their waiting. The way men are patient when they have been told to simply be present and let their presence do its work. Presence as pressure. Presence as a kind of siege that didn't require action. She had seen this too. She had seen this particular tactic used against her people. Not the dramatic confrontation, but the sustained visibility, the constant reminder of what was out there. We can wait, that presence said. We have more time than you have endurance. At 4 a.m, Beckett came off the watch, and she took it, and sat by the window in the dark, and she looked at the desert beyond the fence, and she thought about her brother. She thought about him for the first time in a while. Not because she had forgotten him, she had not forgotten him. Would not, could not, but because the sharpness of that particular grief had blunted somewhat over the weeks, as grief does when it is not constantly attended to. When life fills in around it, she wondered where he was. She wondered if he was well. She thought, I do not know what comes next. I do not know what this man outside my fence with his 17 riders is going to do. I do not know if the sheriff's files are enough. I do not know if I will be here in a month. And then she thought, but I am here now, right now, in this house, in this chair, at this window, alive. Thinking, that is not nothing. That has never been nothing. The sky to the east began to change, not yet light, but the quality of the dark shifting, announcing what was coming. The birds started before the color did. The territorial ones near the cottonwood with their early morning arguments. She sat, and she watched the sky, and she breathed, and she thought, whatever comes next, I will meet it with my eyes open. I have always met things with my eyes open. This will be no different. The sun came up, pink first, then orange, then the full gold of an Arizona morning, spreading across the desert like something being given back to the land after a long absence. She watched it come, and she waited to see what the day would bring. What the day brought was her brother, not 17 men with rifles. Not Delwood Vance in his careful vest, her brother alone. He appeared at the gate around mid-morning, on foot, which meant he had left his horse somewhere out of sight and come the last mile, walking. Which meant he did not want to be seen arriving. Which meant many things. She was watching from the window when he appeared. She knew his walk before she knew his face. The specific quality of his stride, longer on the right than the left, the result of an old injury to the left ankle that had never quite healed evenly. She had teased him about it when they were children. She said, Beckett. He was there immediately. She said, my brother is at the gate. A pause. Is that? I do not know, she said honestly. Yet, he looked at her. Do you want me to? Stay here, she said, but stay where you can see. She did not wait for his answer. She pulled herself to the door, down the step. A process, always a process, but she had gotten faster at it, more efficient with the mechanics of her own movement. And she made her way to the gate. Her brother's name was Taklishim. He was 22 years old, and he had never been able to hide what he felt, and she was grateful for this now. As she came through the gate and looked at his face, because his face told her the answer before she had to ask the question. He looked like someone carrying something heavy across a long distance. Not dangerous. Burdened. Nala, he said. Taki, she said. They looked at each other. He had grown somehow in 8 months. Or she had forgotten exactly how tall he was. Or the desert light was different here. The chief is dead, he said. She was quiet. Last month, he said. He was sick for a while. At the end, he paused. Some things came out before he died. Things he said, things others said when he could no longer, when it no longer mattered who knew. He stopped. The band knows, Nala. About the attack. About what he did. About why you were. He stopped again. His jaw was doing the thing she remembered. The thing he had always done since he was a small boy, when he was trying not to show what he felt. They want you back, he said. Some of them came to me, the older women. The ones who knew you longest. They said, I was told to find you and to say that you would be welcomed back. That what was done was wrong, that you are still. He stopped again. Swallowed. That you are still one of us. She stood at the gate of Beckett Rourke's ranch in the morning sun, and she looked at her brother's face and she felt everything, all of it, all at once, the 8 months, the desert, the 3 days, the knife, the tin cans at the gate, the letter she had not been able to read, the photograph of the laughing woman, the sheriff's careful handwriting, all of it, present simultaneously, large and complicated, and without the decency to arrive in any manageable order. She breathed. She said, How far? 2 days' ride north, he said. Near the mountains. She looked back at the house. Beckett was in the doorway, not eavesdropping, just present, where she could see him. Give me time, she said to Taklashim. Her brother looked past her at Beckett, then back at her, his expression complex, not hostile, not quite accepting. The expression of a young man who is trying to understand a situation that does not match any map he has been given. How much time? He said. I don't know, she said honestly. He nodded slowly. I'll camp to the north, he said. When you're ready, he paused. I'm glad you're alive, sister. His voice on that last word, the specific weight of it, she felt the weight. Go, she said softly. I'll find you. He went. She watched him go, then she turned back toward the house. Toward the man in the doorway who had heard everything and said nothing, and was now waiting with the specific patience of a person who has decided that some things are not his to comment on. She made her way back through the gate. She sat down in her chair by the window, and Beckett sat down across from her, and neither of them said anything for a while. Because some things needed a moment to settle before you could find the words for them. And they had when both learned, over weeks of shared silence, that the other person would wait. She did not sleep that night either, but this time it was different before. The sleepless nights had been tactical, watching windows, counting positions, running the geometry of defense through her mind until the calculations settled into something workable, useful insomnia. The kind that produces output. This was different. This was the kind of sleepless that has no product. She lay on her back and looked at the ceiling and thought about her brother's face. The specific weight of his voice on that last word. Sister. The way 22 years of shared history lived inside a single word, if you knew how to hear it. The juniper tree they had climbed as children. The way he had always laughed too loud at things that were not that funny, and never been embarrassed about it. She thought about the older women, the ones who had known her longest, sending Taklashim with a message. You are still one of us, 8 words. 8 words that she had needed for 8 months, and had not received, and had told herself she did not need, and had been lying about, and known. She was lying about and continued anyway. Because sometimes the lie is the only structure keeping things upright. 8 words, and now they were here, and she did not know what to do with them. She knew what she had expected to feel. Relief. That was the obvious answer. The expected emotional response. Relief and the specific release of a tension that had been wound so tight for so long that you stopped feeling it as tension and started feeling it as just the baseline state of existing. She had expected relief. What she actually felt was more complicated, because relief was there. It was absolutely there. But underneath it, or maybe alongside it, it was hard to say which was something else. Something that felt almost like suspicion. Not of Taklisham specifically. Not of the older women who had sent him. Of the situation itself. They want you back, he had said. Because the chief is dead. Because things came out. Because the band is divided and leaderless and needs someone to unite around. She lay in the dark and she thought, they need something from me, and what they need from me has not changed. 8 months ago, they needed me to be the best pathfinder they had, and then when I stopped being that, they needed me to be gone. And now they need me to be a leader, to fill a space, to serve a function. When was the last time someone needed me to simply be? She lay very still with that thought. She did not like it. She examined it anyway. She had always been better served by thoughts she didn't like than by thoughts she found comfortable. When was the last time someone needed nothing from you? When was the last time you were in a place where your only job was to be present? She looked at the ceiling. She heard Beckett's breathing from the floor. Steady. Slow. The breathing of a man who had given her the bed and taken the floor without commentary, and had been doing it for weeks without ever once making it into a demonstration of sacrifice. That man, she thought, has never once asked you to be anything other than what you are. He has not needed you to walk. He has not needed you to lead. He has not needed you to fill a space that was empty before you arrived. He gave you room. Just room. She closed her eyes and thought, this is the thing I am trying to understand. This is what I need to figure out before morning, not where I am needed, where I choose. The sun came up. She had made coffee by the time Beckett woke. She had managed the stove and the water and the grounds. With the economy, someone who had learned the mechanics of this kitchen thoroughly enough to operate it in the half-dark without making noise enough to wake someone sleeping 6 feet away. He woke and sat up and found coffee already on the table. He looked at it. He looked at her. He said nothing, just sat down and drank his coffee. She appreciated this about him, the way he understood that some mornings did not need narration. They sat in the quiet for a while. You didn't sleep, he said finally. Not a question. No, me either, he said. Much. She looked at him. He looked back. The morning light came through the window at the angle it always came through in October, lower now than it had been in the summer, cutting across the table in a long gold stripe that divided the surface between them. Beckett, she said. Yeah, I need to tell you something. He put his cup down, gave her his full attention, not braced, not preemptively arranging his face into something reassuring, just present. When Taklisham came yesterday, she said. When he said the band wanted me back, she paused. I expected to feel something clear. I expected to know the answer and I don't, she said. The answer I have is not the one I expected to have. He looked at her steadily. She looked back. Tell me, he said. She told him what she had spent the night thinking, not all of it, not the formless parts that still hadn't taken shape, but the core of it. The thing she had arrived at around 3 in the morning when the desert was at its most silent, and the coyotes had finished their business, and the sky was that particular dark that comes just as before it starts to change. The difference between being needed and being chosen, the difference between filling a function and occupying a place. She told him that she had spent her entire life being useful. That usefulness had been her identity before her injury, and her tragedy after it. That the band had discarded her when she stopped being useful and was now recalling her because they needed her usefulness again. She told him that she understood this, that she did not blame them for it, that people in difficult circumstances make decisions according to need, and this was not a moral failing. It was survival mathematics. but she told him that she had been here, in this house, in this chair, at this window, for weeks now, and that for the first time in her memory, she had been somewhere that did not require her to justify her presence by producing something. He had let her mend the shirts, but not asked her to. He had built the saddle arrangement so she could come outside, but never made her feel like a problem he was solving. He had given her the bed. She did not tell him all of this directly. She told it sideways, in the way of a person who has not yet decided how much of the internal landscape to reveal. But she told him enough. He listened to all of it, with the focused, complete attention she had come to expect from him. The attention of a man who had learned that listening was the most useful thing he could offer and had committed to offering it well. When she finished, he was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Can I say something?" "Yes, when Eleanor died," he said. "My wife. When she died, people kept telling me what I needed, what I should do, whether I should sell the ranch and go back east, whether I should stay, whether I should get a dog, whether I should," he exhaled. Everybody had an answer for what Beckett Rourke needed next. And none of them asked Beckett Rourke. She waited. "The night I found you," he said, "I didn't know why I stopped. I've thought about it 100 times. I still don't have a clean answer." He paused. "But I know it wasn't because I decided you needed saving. It was because of something in your face that I recognized and couldn't walk away from." He looked at the coffee cup. "I didn't bring you here because you needed me," he said. "I brought you here because—" He stopped. Started again. "I think I needed to do something that mattered, something that wasn't just maintenance. Feeding horses and fixing fence and going to sleep and waking up and doing it again." He looked up at her. "You mattered. The situation mattered. And I needed that." She looked at him. He looked back. "I'm not asking you to stay," he said. "I want to be clear about that. It's not my place to ask, but I want you to know that if you do, it's not because I need you here. It's not because you're useful to this operation." He paused. "It's because you're you." He said it simply, without drama. "It's because you're you, and that's the whole of it." The morning light moved on the table between them. She sat with what he had said. She sat with it for a long time. They did not have time to sit with it longer, because that was when the riders came. 2 mornings after the ridge. Not 17 this time. More. She heard them before she saw them. The particular thunder of many horses moving fast. Not the measured approach of men who want to be visible, but the purposeful approach of men who have been given a time and a target, and are committed to both. Beckett, he was already at the window. She pulled herself to the other window, the one that gave the northeast angle. And what she saw, she counted fast. She had always counted fast. It was muscle memory at this point. 22, 23. Coming from the North Road and the East simultaneously, he had learned from the last time, or someone had taught him. East Creek bed? Beckett said, and the main road, she said. Both at once. He's done waiting. No pause between them. They had talked through this scenario. Not because they had known this specific morning, but because they were both people who prepared for the shape of a thing before the thing arrived. He went for the rifles. She went for the position she had identified 2 weeks ago, the corner of the south wall, where the window angle gave her both the east approach and the west fence line. She had spent mornings at this window that Beckett had thought she was simply resting. She had been working, measuring distances, calculating drop, noting which fence posts would serve as reference points for range. She was not a person who rested when there was work to be done. She set the rifle across the window sill, breathed. The riders came on. The first thing Delwood Vance did was stop his men at the fence line. Which told her everything. He was not a man who wanted blood on his hands if he could avoid it. He was a man who wanted results with the minimum of evidence connecting him to the method of obtaining them. 23 armed men at a fence line was a message. A last message. A message that said, here is what comes next. If you do not make the choice I am offering you." He rode to the gate himself. She watched him through the window, the careful vest, the controlled, pleasant face that was today showing considerably more of what lived underneath it. Not rage, not passion, just certainty. The face of a man who has decided that the time for subtlety has passed and has adjusted his presentation accordingly. "Rourke," he called. Beckett opened the door, stood in it, rifle in his hands, but pointed down. The posture of a man who is prepared but not initiating. She adjusted her angle from the window. "I'm going to say this once," Vance said. His voice was still controlled. Impressive, she thought, given that he was sitting in front of a man with a rifle, backed by 23 of his own. The voice of someone who had learned to modulate carefully enough that the modulation had become involuntary. "Walk away from this. Take what you can carry. The woman too. I'll give you a week. After that, the county assessment goes through and you have nothing," Beckett said. "No." Vance looked at him. The pleasant surface thinned. Beckett, the first name now. The false intimacy of it. "Be reasonable." "I am being reasonable," Beckett said. "I'm reasonably standing in my own doorway, on my own land, telling you to get off it." A pause from Vance. She watched his hands. His hands were the tell. The face was trained, but the hands always showed the real calculation happening underneath. They were still right now. Patient, still. But with a quality of stillness that preceded movement. She adjusted her grip.
"You can't fight 20 men."
Vance said. "I'm not alone," Beckett said simply. Vance's eyes moved to the window where she sat. She did not move back from the glass. She let him see her. Let him see the rifle and the stillness, and the eyes that were doing exactly what they were doing. Reading him, reading the men behind him, counting and measuring and preparing. His jaw moved slightly. She had made him uncertain, good. She had always been good at making men underestimate what they were looking at, and then making them regret the underestimation. She heard the horse before she saw it. Single rider, coming fast from the south. The south, which was the direction of town. Which was the direction of the sheriff's office. Vance heard it too. His head turned. Grove Parish came through the south approach at a gallop. Not alone. She saw two men behind him, and behind those two, more. Not the sheriff's department, which in Ashford Crossing consisted of the sheriff and one deputy. These were townspeople. 8, 10. Some she had seen at the general store, at the livery. At the edges of the crowd the first time she and Beckett had ridden in and drawn all those eyes. Edna Parrish was among them, on horseback, riding astride, despite the dress, with the expression of a woman who has made a decision and is not going to discuss it with anyone. Parrish pulled up between Vance's men and the gate. He did not reach for his weapon. He did not need to. He reached into his coat and produced a document. "Delwood Vance," he said. His voice was carrying but calm. The voice of a man who had waited to say something until he was certain. He had the right thing to say. "I have a federal warrant for your arrest, in connection with conspiracy to defraud the United States government through false military scouting contracts in the Arizona Territory, specifically relating to contracts signed in September of 1876. The air went very still. The 23 riders behind Vance went very still. Vance's hands. She was watching them. They had been patient still for the whole exchange. Now they were doing something different, something smaller and faster. The specific movement of a man rapidly reassessing an enormous number of variables simultaneously. "This is ridiculous," Vance said. Even now the voice was controlled. "It might be," Parrish said. "That's for a federal judge to decide. But until that decision is made, you are not conducting any county-level land transactions. You are not collecting on any county-level debts. And you are not." He looked at the line of riders, doing whatever this is. Vance turned to look at his men. She watched this moment. This was the moment in any standoff where the calculation became collective. 23 men who had been hired for one thing were now looking at a federal warrant and a sheriff, and a group of townspeople who had shown up when a lot of people assumed they wouldn't. And each of those 23 was running his own arithmetic right now, was running the numbers on whether his pay for this day's work was worth a federal conspiracy charge. She knew these numbers. She knew how they came out. 3 of the men on the east side turned their horses first, then 2 more on the north. Then the rest came in a gradual dissolution, like a formation, losing its shape to a change in wind. Unhurried, because hurrying would have been an admission, but moving. Moving away. Moving back toward the roads that led to wherever they had come from, before Delwood Vance had contracted them for a job that was turning out to be considerably more complicated than advertised. Vance sat on his horse in the silence left by his departing army. He sat very still. She had expected anger. She had braced for the explosion of a man who has controlled everything for a long time, watching it all come apart. She had seen this before, the moment when control fails and what's underneath it gets out. But Vance did not explode. He looked at the warrant in Parrish's hand, then at Beckett in the doorway. Then, and she had not expected this, at the window where she sat, he looked at her for a long time. And what she saw in his face in that moment was not anger. It was the face of a man who has done something long enough that it had stopped feeling like a choice, and had become simply the way things were, and who is now looking at the consequence of that and experiencing the specific unpleasant sensation of having the distance between action and consequence whence collapse, suddenly to nothing, not remorse exactly. Something adjacent, something that might become remorse if he sat with it long enough in a quiet room. She held his eyes and said nothing. She did not need to say anything. She had already said everything she needed to say. She had said it in Grove Parrish's kitchen. With his careful handwriting recording each word, Parrish dismounted and walked to Vance, and the rest of it was administrative, calm, procedural. Beckett stepped back from the doorway. She sat back from the window. When it was over, when the riders had gone and Vance had been taken into Parrish's custody, and the townspeople had milled briefly in the road, outside the gate, with the vaguely surprised energy of people who had shown up to do a thing and found the thing was already mostly done, Edna Parrish came inside. She sat down at the table. She looked at Nala. She looked at Beckett. She said, "Well, just that. Just well," in the tone of a woman who has a great deal she could say and is choosing instead the one syllable that contains all of it. Beckett said, "Thank you, Edna." She waved this away. "Don't thank me. Thank Grove. He's been building that case for 2 weeks." She paused. "Thank the Hendersons and the Boyle family and old Marcus Deere from the livery, who came because they have been waiting for an excuse to stop being afraid of that man for a very long time." Nala looked at her. "They came," she said. "Not a question, just the fact of it, stated, because sometimes facts need to be stated out loud to become real. They came," Edna confirmed. Nala sat with this. She sat with the image of 8, 10 townspeople of Ashford Crossing, who had looked at her with suspicion or curiosity or outright hostility the first time she rode in on Beckett's horse with her back straight and her eyes forward, those same people riding south in the morning to put themselves between a threat and a ranch where an Apache woman sat by a window with a rifle. Not for her specifically. She understood that. They were there. For Beckett, for the principal, for their own accumulated anger at Delwood Vance, which had been looking for a moment to express itself. But they had come. And she had been part of the reason the moment existed. She had given testimony. She had provided the piece that connected the existing files to something actionable. She had been the witness that made a pattern instead of an isolated event. She had done something from a chair, from a window. With a rifle she'd learned to load in an afternoon, and a language she'd learned word by pointed word over weeks of shared suppers. The person who cannot walk is not the person who cannot act. She had known this once. She had forgotten it somewhere between the bullet and the desert. And now, Sitting in this chair with this rifle in this window. She remembered. Edna left in the early afternoon. She hugged Nala before she left. A quick, firm, no-nonsense hug of the kind that Edna Parrish probably applied to most things. Practical, present, complete. Nala, who had not been held by another person in 8 months, sat very still while it happened. "Come to dinner Sunday," Edna said. To both of them. "Grove will want to tell you about the federal process in more detail than either of you will want to hear. But we'll have a decent meal to compensate." And she was gone. Beckett stood at the door and watched her ride away, and then turned back into the room. It was very quiet, the ordinary quiet of a Tuesday afternoon in October in Arizona territory. The birds, the wind, the horses in the corral doing horse things with their customary complete indifference to the events of the morning. He sat down at the table. She sat across from him. "It's not over," he said. "No," she agreed. "The federal process will take time. Vance has lawyers, he does, and money. Yes." She looked at the table. "But it is different now. He does not have the ability to move against us directly. Not with a federal inquiry active. Not with witnesses." Beckett exhaled. Long, the exhale of a man releasing something he had been holding for a while. "Parrish will need your testimony again," he said, formally. "When the federal judge comes, I know," she said. "Will you?" He stopped. "Yes," she said, before he could finish the question. Because she knew what it was going to be and she already knew the answer. "Yes, I will." He nodded, looked at the table, looked at her. "Taklishim is camped north," he said quietly. "Yes, he's waiting, yes," and there it was. The thing they had both been moving around all day like a piece of furniture rearranged in the night that you keep almost walking into. She looked at the window. The afternoon light at the angle it had now. Lower, longer. The October angle that made the desert go gold in the late afternoon in a way that was almost unreasonably beautiful. "Can I ask you something?" She said, "Yes. When you came home to this house," she said. "After Eleanor died, after the fever. When you came back here alone," she paused. "What did it feel like?" He was very still. "Empty," he said. It felt not just quiet, empty. Like a thing that has been drained, he paused. Like a vessel that used to hold something, and now holds the shape of what it held instead. She nodded. "I know that feeling," she said. He looked at her. "The desert," she said. "The 3 days. After the band left." She looked at the window. "I felt it there. Not the pain, not the fear, just the emptiness of being the shape of something that used to exist." He said nothing, waited. "I feel it less," she said carefully. "Here. I feel it less here than I have felt it anywhere in 8 months." The afternoon light moved on the table. Neither of them said anything for a long time. She found Taklishim at dusk. He had camped in the wash north of the ranch, exactly where he had said he would. Small fire. No horse visible, but she heard it somewhere in the rocks. He stood up when he heard her approach, which meant he had heard her long before she appeared, which meant he was still sharp, still careful, good. She made her way across the ground to where he stood. The mechanics of it took longer than she would have liked. But she was faster than she had been 2 months ago, her arms stronger. Her knowledge of her own movement more complete, more efficient. He did not move to help her. She had not asked him to. When she reached him, he sat back down, and she positioned herself across the fire from him, and they looked at each other in the firelight. He looked older, or she had just forgotten the exact configuration of his face, and was now adjusting to the current version. "Are you well?" she asked, in Apache. It felt like putting on something worn and familiar and deeply comfortable after months of borrowing other people's clothes. "Well enough," he said. "You, better than I was." He looked at her for a moment. "I can see that." She let this sit. "Tell me about the band," she said. He told her. He talked for a long time. She listened. He told her about the months after she had been left, the movement, the army, the seasons. He told her about the chief's illness, and what had been said before the end, and what had been revealed. He told her about the factions within the band now, and the older women who had spoken, and the younger warriors who were uncertain, and the children who simply needed something stable. He told her about a valley to the north that the band had found, with water, protected on 3 sides. It's good country, he said. The kind of country that could hold us for a while. She looked at the fire. You would be welcomed, he said. Not pressuring, just stating the fact of it, the way she had stated facts all day. Because in their family they had always been people who stated facts and let the other person decide what to do with them. I know, she said. And? He said. She looked up from the fire. She looked at her brother's face across the small flame, she thought. 22 years, the juniper tree. The way he laughed too loud. The way he had looked at me the last time, before he walked away, and had done the thing I asked. Had gone when I told him to go, because I needed him to, and he knew I needed him to, even though it cost him something. She thought, I love this person. He is my blood. He is the person who shares my memory of our mother's hands, she thought. And the band is real, and the valley is real, and the need is real, she thought. And I am still Apache. That does not change. And then she thought, but being Apache does not mean going where I am needed. It has never meant that. Being Apache means being strong enough to choose. Being Apache means having the courage to say what is true, even when it costs something. Being Apache means being the person who can hold the truth in her hand without flinching from it. And the truth is, she said. Taki. He looked at her. I am not coming back, she said. Not now. Not for this. His face. She watched his face. He did not explode. He did not argue. He was 22 years old, and he had his mother's jaw and their grandmother's eyes. And he sat across the fire from her, and he let the words land and he let them be real. Why, he said. Quietly. Because they need me to fill something, she said. And I have spent my whole life filling things. Being the shape of what was needed. The best pathfinder. The good daughter. The useful one. She paused. And I do not know, I have never known, what I am when I am just. Myself. Without the function. Without the usefulness. He was looking at her, that man, he said. He is part of it, she said. He is not all of it. He is not even most of it. She met her brother's eyes. It is me. It is my own life I am trying to find. The shape of it. What it looks like when I stop being what is needed and start being what I choose. The fire crackled. The desert held its nighttime sounds. Insects in the brush. Wind in the rocks. The small anonymous movements of things that owned the dark. I was afraid, Taklashim said finally. When you were left. I was afraid I would never. He stopped. His jaw worked. I was afraid you were already gone by the time I could have gone back. I know, she said gently. I should have, Taki. She waited until he looked at her. You did what I asked. You went. Because I needed you too. She paused. And now I'm asking you to go again. To go back to the band. To be well. To find me when the valley is settled and the band is steady, and you want to see your sister's face. He looked at her across the fire, 22 years old, too old now for the juniper tree. Old enough to sit across a fire and hold something difficult without dropping it. I don't understand him, he said finally, the him clearly meaning Beckett. Clearly meaning the man he had seen in the doorway yesterday, the white cowboy in his worn work clothes, who had stood exactly where he was needed and said exactly nothing. I know, she said. I didn't either, at first. Do you now? She thought about this honestly. Some of it, she said. Enough. He was quiet for a long moment, then, the older women will be disappointed. Yes, especially Lena. Lena is always disappointed in me, Nala said. This is not new. Something shifted on his face. Almost. The too loud laugh she remembered. Not quite, but close. She looked at him across the fire and memorized his face in this light, the way she had always memorized things, carefully, completely, so that she would have it later, so it would be there when she needed it. Come find me, she said. When you're settled, come find me and tell me about the valley. He looked at her for a long moment, then he nodded. Once. Slowly, stay safe, sister, he said. And you, she said. She made her way back through the dark to Beckett Rourke's ranch, to the gate with its tin cans, to the window with its particular angle of light, to the table where two people had been eating together for weeks without naming what they were doing. He was awake when she came in. Of course he was. He was sitting at the table, with cold coffee and the account ledgers and the specific posture of a man who has been not reading something for a while doing something else entirely with his brain. He looked up. She made her way to the chair, her chair, the one by the window. She sat, he waited. I told him I'm not going back, she said. Beckett said nothing. But something moved across his face, fast, there and then managed. The thing that happens when you hear news you were trying not to want. Nala, let me finish, she said. He closed his mouth. I'm not staying because of you, she said. I need you to understand this. I'm not staying because you're here. I'm not staying because you rescued me, or because I owe you, or because, she stopped, found the words. Those are the old reasons. The reasons I've always moved according to. What's needed, what's owed, what makes me useful. He was very still. I'm staying, she said, because when I ask myself where I want to be, when I try to look at that question honestly, without the function, without the usefulness, the answer is here. She looked at the window. I do not fully understand why yet. Maybe that is enough. To not know why, but to know the answer. He was quiet for a very long time. So long that she started to wonder if she had said too much, if the honesty of it had been too large for the room. Then he said, Eleanor used to say. He stopped, started again. She used to say that the best decisions she ever made were the ones she couldn't fully explain afterward, that the ones she could explain completely were usually the ones she had to talk herself into. He paused. She was almost always right about things like that. Nala looked at the photograph on the shelf. The laughing woman. She sounds like someone who understood things, Nala said. She did, he said. She would have. He stopped. I know, Nala said. He looked at her. She looked back, and something settled between them, not resolved, not finished, not named, not decided entirely, but settled. The way the desert settles after a storm. Everything rearranged, everything redistributed, but settled. At rest, you'll need to testify, he said, when the federal judge comes. Yes. I know, Parrish said. It could be a year. The full process, I know. Vance will fight every piece of it. I know, Beckett. He looked at her. She looked back. I know all of this, she said. I am still here, he exhaled, picked up his coffee, looked at it and set it down because it was cold, and he had forgotten about it 20 minutes ago. Stood up and went to the stove to make more, and she watched him do this. The ordinary domestic motion of a man making coffee in his own kitchen at the end of a day that had contained 17 armed riders and a federal warrant and a conversation with her brother by firelight in the desert dark. Just making coffee. Sunday, she said. He looked up from the stove. Edna Parrish invited us to dinner Sunday, she said. Right, he said. She did. I would like to go, Nala said. If that's, yes, he said, without any pause at all. Yes. Of course. She looked at the window. The night outside was clear. Stars beginning to show over the desert in their dense, unhurried way, not appearing all at once but accumulating, the sky deepening through its layers as the dark matured and revealed more of what it contained. She had always loved the Arizona stars. She loved them still. The morning after, the first morning after Vance had been taken into federal custody, and Taklishim had ridden north, and the 17 men had dissolved back into the landscape they had come from. The morning after all of that was a Tuesday. Just Tuesday. Just the birds and the horses and the well and the light. Beckett made breakfast. She made the coffee. They had arrived at this division of labor gradually, without discussion, the way the other arrangements had arrived, through small daily decisions that accumulated into pattern. He put a plate in front of her. She put a cup in front of him. They sat. Outside the window, the desert was doing what it always did, being enormous, and old and completely indifferent to the small human dramas conducted within it. The rocks had been there before any of them and would be there long after. The sky did not record events. The sand did not remember. She found this comforting. She always had. The east fence still needs work, he said. The post nearest the cottonwood, she agreed. I noticed yesterday. I'll get to it after the horses. The tin cans at the west gate also. I'll reset them. She looked at him. He looked at her. What, he said. Nothing, she said, which was not entirely true. But some things did not have efficient words yet. Some things were still in the stage, where they existed in the space between people, rather than in any expressible form, and forcing words onto things before they were ready for words was a way of making them smaller than they were. She was not interested in making this smaller than it was. She drank her coffee. He ate his breakfast. The birds made their arguments in the cottonwood. The horses moved in the corral. The desert went about its ancient business in every direction. And in Beckett Rourke's small, clean ranch house in Arizona Territory. On a Tuesday in October of 1877, two people sat across a table and ate breakfast together. Not because they had figured everything out, just because it was morning and they were both still here. She went to the window afterward, her window. The one with the October morning light, at its specific angle, the one that showed her the desert in all its directions, and the road to town to the south, and the cottonwood by the well, and the fence line that Beckett was going to fix today. She sat in her chair. She looked out. She was not watching for riders. Not today. Not this morning. Today she was just looking. Watch the way the light moved across the ground, the way a jackrabbit moved along the fence line, stopped, reconsidered, continued, the way the shadows of the clouds moved across the desert floor in great slow shapes, like enormous gentle things. Behind her, Beckett was doing the dishes with the particular sound that dishwashing makes. Water and ceramic in the rhythm of a task so habitual, it requires no attention. Ordinary sounds, the sounds of a morning. She looked at the desert. The jackrabbit along the fence line stopped again. Turned its head toward the house. Large ears working independent of each other, scanning for sounds she couldn't produce from here. Then it moved on. She watched it go. She thought, I do not know what comes next. I know that some things take a long time to be resolved, and some things are never fully resolved, only lived with differently. She thought, I am here. I am present. I am not the shape of something that used to exist. I am myself. Still learning what that means. But myself. The desert was gold in the morning light. Gold and red, and the specific burnt orange of the rock formations to the north. That she had been looking at every morning for 2 months, and had not yet stopped finding. Beautiful, she would not stop. She already knew this. She had lived in this landscape her entire life, and she had not yet stopped finding it beautiful, and she was not going to start now. Some things do not require reasons to be worth having. Some things are just good, the last good thing, and then the next one, and then the one after that. This was how you kept going. This was, she thought, how you had always kept going, one good thing at a time. Beckett finished the dishes. She heard him dry his hands, heard the soft weight of the towel on the hook beside the stove, heard him come and stand beside her, not in front of the window, beside, so that they were both looking out at the same thing, the same desert, the same morning, the same October light going gold on the same rocks. Neither of them said anything, which was the right thing. After a while he put his hand on the windowsill beside hers, not on her hand, beside it, close enough that the warmth was there, but the space was still hers. She looked at his hand. She looked at the desert. She moved her hand so that it covered his. He did not move. She did not move. Outside, the desert was enormous and old and going about its business. And in this one small window, in this one small house, two people held still, together, and breathed.